Hey, Movie versus Movie family. Guess what? We are still sponsored by Daily Dose of Yarn. Are you like, oh, I could use something to protect my great big brain from Hannibal Lecter trying to scoop it out with a little dinner spoon? Or are you like, I have a problem with these rats jumping on my head and pulling my hair, puppeting my body around without my control? Well, guess what? I have a solution for you, and this solution is a custom-made hat, a beanie made, homemade by Daily Dose of Yarn. It's incredible. You can go find them on Instagram or Etsy. The link is in the show notes. Go get one of these beautiful hats. Also, at the beginning, we also talk until we get a cold open, so... Do you have anything funny?
Do you ride the red line often?
I do.
Is the voiceover announcer always insane? Because he was insane today.
There is one guy who is like approaching Central Square. Central Square!
That's the guy. He's like, you're riding the Braintree line. Braintree.
Yeah.
And then he just like throws in like, hope your Monday's going well.
Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.
Welcome back, everyone. This is, after a long absence, the return of Movie versus Movie. I am your host, Nick, and today I am being co-hosted? What would the word be?
I don't know. It's an honor.
It's an honor.
Sub-hosted.
But I am having my good friend Patrick come in to talk to us about some movies that we watched together. So Patrick, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you?
I'm Patrick. Nick and I.
I'm Patrick.
Nick and I do improv together, and I've done like 2 podcasts before this.
Which ones? What are they? Where can people find your work?
It was another improv mate back in Asheville, North Carolina, had a podcast called Gold Bones, and I did 2 episodes.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for all the Patrick stands after the end of the episode, they can find his work in Gold Bones.
If it still exists, I don't know.
But Patrick and I were watching some movies and we're like, hey, these movies are tied together by a loose thread. So Patrick, why don't you introduce the theme and what movies we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So the theme is, how do you put it succinctly? The theme is culinary the theme is unconventional instruction with a culinary twist. I feel like that about sums it up.
That's pretty good. That sums it up.
Because it started with, we rewatched Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, which has one of the greatest culinary mentors in cinema.
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly.
And then we were like, oh, obviously we need to pair this with a movie. So what did we decide?
Yeah. Well, obviously there's only one better culinary mentor in cinema, and that's Remy the Rat.
From Ratatouille, yeah. So this natural pairing, we're kind of going on this theme of culinary mentors, and we're going to figure out which one is the better culinary movie representation in this cage match between Silence of the Lambs, a 1990 classic. I think it came out in like 1993? 3? Let me see.
Somewhere around then.
Yeah, it's somewhere around then.
It's like the same age as we are. 91.
91, so it's a little older than we are.
Yeah.
And then 2007's when Ratatouille came out. It was about time for Silence of the Lambs was due for a remake anyway, so they made Ratatouille. Yeah. Disney spin.
Yeah, honestly, they were a little egregious with their references in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like shot for shot,
I know.
Really? You know,
come on.
No creativity.
It's a little cheap, but...
So let's dive into Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs is directed by Jonathan Demme, and it is, Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Did you know that Hannibal Lecter only is on screen for like 13 minutes?
Yes, I feel like that's always the stat that's thrown out of like because he won Oscar for best lead actor, right?
Yeah, and people were like, "This guy's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
this guy's amazing."
I mean, yeah, it's interesting because the movie ostensibly is about Clarice,
yeah.
but yeah, obviously he's such like a specter over it.
Does Jodie Foster always have that accent that Clarice has?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's her natural.
Can I say something that might be an unpopular opinion?
Go for it.
I can't stand that accent. It's
No.
so close to my stepmother's.
Oh no!
So I was like, oh boy,
Triggered.
this is triggering.
I feel like it is depending on the performance. I feel like it can be grating.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so iconic. Like
She's
well,
I mean, she's fantastic in the
yeah,
film, but
and like
it was
Clarice
just-
is like her iconic role.
Yeah. So, what do you think going into this movie? Had you seen it before or
So I had never seen the entire movie, which
Yeah,
I
it's-
feel like
it's one of those that like you see on cable all the time
Yes.
and you like catch for 15 minutes
exactly,
at a time.
yeah. And I was telling you, I distinctly remember seeing the end because I am still a little scaredy pants, but was
Yeah.
more so and as a kid and would never watch horror movies. But I remember it coming on. The scene where she's in the basement, and
Ooh,
it was one of those things where I turn the volume all the way down to like 8,
Yeah.
and I just have my thumb on the back channel button, just like waiting for
a
something
quick escape.
terrifying, to happen. But no, I had never seen the whole thing. I feel like it's one of those movies too that has such a massive cultural footprint.
Yeah.
Like it was super interesting to see the movie because I think the movie itself is way more nuanced in like the themes that
Yeah.
it's dealing with than
in its approach to cooking.
yeah. I mean, all you ever hear about is the Chianti and the liver, but
I mean, like honestly, the movie is one of those movies that now people like watching it back are like, oh, I've heard about this 100,000 times, and maybe it doesn't have the same resonance, but it's a really well-made movie. It's like really
Yeah.
beautiful. The shots are interesting, and I think that it deals with some pretty like interesting stuff. Like there's a lot of so we're focusing kind of jokingly on the whole eating people of it all, but I think that the movie actually really wants you to focus on the idea of being watched and how like people's kind of leering perceptions of you can like really affect somebody. And the way that it mostly does this is by showing Clarice's interaction with people of the opposite gender and within her profession or within the world that she moves within. And then you have some of that too with like Buffalo Bill having sort of like, you know, obsessing over what they see, I guess, as like the object of their desire and their brutal murders.
yeah. No, I feel like we kept pointing out watching it like so much of the movie is just close up, someone's entire face like filling the frame.
Yeah, and then they're looking straight down the barrel
Yes,
too. It's
yeah.
just looking right at you. So it's like really trying to. It's sort of it's trying to, I don't know, include the audience. I don't know. It's just sort of like when you see these people like looking, especially when it's people looking at you who are making the character either Clarice or the woman that's abducted. I don't remember her name. Does she? She does have a name.
She's a
as
name because she's the
senator's
daughter of
like,
the,
hey.
yeah.
But even like Hannibal, all those people, whenever people look at them and have like ill intent, it's like very unsettling because they're always looking at you with sort of this weird like look in their eye. And it's creepy. And as an audience member, since you are being looked at directly, it also makes you feel like, oh, this does not feel good.
Yeah, it's like unnatural because you're like you're not supposed to be looking at me. Like
I'm observing.
Yeah,
right. It's
there's
sort
like
of
a step removed. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too, where it's like usually movies let you stay as a participant, not as a participant, but as an observer, like you said. But this kind of forces you to participate because it's making you be one of the people looking directly at it. But before we like really dive into the sort of the themes and the actual making of the film, let's kind of like start going through what actually happened. So Clarice is our main character. an FBI trainee ACAB before the times, but
First of all.
yeah, first of all, let's just say ACAB. Clarice bastard.
Clarice, you're not exempt.
But the first time we see her is like that. And I'm kind of interested in why you think that they did this, where they just have her on the track doing the kind of FBI like field training.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a physical stamina thing. Maybe it's I don't really know why. Like maybe the filmmaker was trying to show like this person is really capable. I'm not really sure.
That makes sense to me. I mean, that's what like. There's never, even though she's young and naive, like I feel like there's never any doubt in the movie about her intellect, and so maybe that's like also to be like, look, she's like, yeah, she's fully capable of the job she's in.
Yeah.
And like setting that up front to kind of give context for like how she's treated the rest of the movie by.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too because she's in a field, the FBI, that is widely dominated by men, and a lot of times throughout the movie you see how men are only seeing her as either a sexual object or as a woman, sort of like to be ignored or pushed to the side. But you also have certain men, and it's sort of like one of the parts of the thriller of this movie is like which person that she's kind of having to put her trust in is going to actually turn out to be a decent person.
Yeah. And it's also like, well, I feel like there's a couple things. One, I might have been on the Wikipedia that like this movie came out, won like Best Picture and everything.
Yeah.
It was super popular, and the FBI started using it to like recruit female agents, which I feel like kind of speaks to the cultural legacy of the movie too, because like watching the actual movie, you know, like Clarice is like badass and like solves the case, but like being a woman in that, it doesn't make it look very fun.
Yeah, it's sort of like, why would you use this to recruit? Because the whole movie is like, wow, look how badly they're treating her, like from the start to the finish. Because like, so as she gets pulled off the field, she's basically told, go talk to your boss, essentially, this guy named Jack Crawford, who is someone who was a teacher in when she was coming up through the academy. And we also have sort of a I kind of think it's like a red herring where they talk about how he's the only person who gave her like a B- or something for a paper. That he was like, yeah, you wrote this like great paper, and she was like, yeah, you gave it like an A- or something, which kind of I feel like sets it up to be like, oh, this guy's also an asshole, and we kind of follow him as he wants her help trying to solve the Buffalo Bill case, which is this person, a serial killer who has been kind of skinning parts of women and then dumping them into different bodies of water and stuff. They can't catch him. He's in West Virginia somewhere. Well, actually, this is an interesting thing too, where we'll talk about later, but I'm sort of at a loss to say which pronouns to use, because there's a lot of stuff in there where, like, this is probably the most problematic part of the film, is that it's kind of the classic transgender killer sort of thing. But there's also a lot of stuff within the movie where, like, even Hannibal Lecter's like, this person is not transgender. This person's just insane.
Yeah. I feel like that's the like nuanced stuff that like I was surprised by, where like the movie like does go out of the way to be like, they're not like committing crimes because of like sexual deviancy.
Yeah.
They're like, that's their, you know, they've suffered abuse and trauma in their life, and like there's a lot of other stuff going on. Obviously that all gets lost in like I feel like just all of the 90s was like, you know, just all of the awful like Buffalo Bill style jokes that come out of it. Yeah. You know, obviously, but yeah, I thought that was surprising.
It's surprising, and I also don't even know how much the movie takes that claim seriously, because there are points where they are showing Bill sort of like putting on makeup and lipstick, and it's kind of played for like, look how creepy and scary this is. Yeah. And so I'm not even sure how much the movie believes it, but it's in the script. You know what I mean? There's like parts of the script where it's like, oh, this person isn't doing this because they are actually a woman. they're doing this because they want to dramatically change themselves because they hate who they are and they want to escape their feeling of helplessness in their life. And so they are seeking power essentially through killing people.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a really nuanced thing where I don't know where I land on it, where it's like you said, way more nuanced than all the Buffalo Bill jokes and just sort of the references. And I think it's even more nuanced than the cinematographer takes it sometimes. So I don't know how much credit to give.
Yeah. I feel like it is walking a weird line, and like it's also in the movie too. I'm also like it's Hannibal Lecter that's analyzing him, and like Hannibal Lecter's not necessarily the most reliable character.
Yeah.
Like I know he's like the smartest man in the world or whatever, but also I'm like, he's just gonna say whatever.
He's the Dos Equis man.
Yeah.
He's like, when I do eat people, I eat it with a Dos Equis.
Yeah.
The most interesting man in the world.
His little hat in the last scene. This is
amazing. We'll get there, but like, so she's pulled off the course. She goes to her old teacher, Jack Crawford, who is this guy in the FBI who's seeking out. He's like a psychologist and criminologist, I guess, and they're trying to figure out this Buffalo Bill case. And so then they send Clarice to Hannibal Lecter, basically like Jack Crawford's like biggest catch, essentially, who put Hannibal away. And he is a cannibal, but also a psychologist who's just like a brilliant psychologist. And they think that by going there, maybe Clarice can get a little bit of something out of Hannibal that might help with the case. So they send her to Baltimore.
And it was wild to me how like that's the iconic scene, like Hannibal behind the glass doing the thing in the like but that's like the second scene of the movie. It's like 5 minutes in and you're in that and you're like gripping the edge of your seat because it's like
oh shit. And it's shot beautifully. It's really amazing. There's a if you go onto YouTube, there's a really great channel called Every Frame a Painting, and they break down this scene about how every time Clarice and Hannibal are in a scene together, the cinematography is shot in such a way that you can always see the power dynamic between them based on like who is above the other in the frame and like who's looking directly into the camera or who's looking off to the side. Who do we get the most access to? It's a really interesting video essay. So I would recommend doing that as a companion piece to this podcast. But yeah, so they send her to the thing. But before we actually see Hannibal, we meet the psychiatrist or whatever, who's like the total jerk face.
Yeah, I had like forgotten about him.
Dr. Frederick Chilton. Yeah, he's just like a huge asshole. Immediately, he's like, "Hey, Baltimore's a cool town. Want to like go out on the town and date me?" And she's like, "No."
I was gonna say earlier when we were talking about the male gaze stuff that like it doesn't ever get super overtly sexual, which I guess like he's the closest one that is. But I do kind of appreciate that like it kind of like trusts the audience to get just like a lot of it's in like looks and like.
Well, there's one moment that is a little bit more overtly sexual.
Maybe I'm need to watch this movie again.
No, you don't. You don't.
That happens immediately after. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
We'll get there. But yeah, I agree that like. It's sort of like Zodiac, and in a way of that the movie doesn't tell you what all of these characters are thinking, and oftentimes it just like lets them look at you, and that kind of I think that's kind of the point, that you don't know what they're thinking, and it could be harmful, it could be not. And since when the camera is looking directly at them and they're looking directly into the camera, they are placing you into Clarice's shoes so that you are like, oh, this feels really bad and scary because they're just staring at me in a weird way. Yeah. And so, so she goes down. Chilton's a total tool. Walks her to the patient's room, I guess. And he's like, hey, when we go in, and she's like, oh, no, just me. And he is immediately a jerk to her. Kind of setting up that he kind of feels some level of ownership over Hannibal in a very strange way that we'll probably discuss later. But yeah, so she gets into the kind of cell and goes down, and there's this kind of raving line of criminals who are just like grabbing the bars and crying and like screaming, really setting up that, man, this place sucks.
Yeah, like I feel like a little cartoonishly so, probably.
Yeah, it's like, man, these people are super mentally ill if they were acting this way. I mean, there's one guy who's like just jerking off in his cell, and it's not great. And again, she's just sort of like, ugh, this is scary and terrible, walks through. But throughout all of this and throughout the whole movie, she is being forced to repress those feelings too. Like, she cannot express, I don't like this. This is scary. This is uncomfortable, because as a woman, she actually can't, because then she would then be sort of like the last bit of power that she has by being given essentially status through the FBI. That would all be taken away from her if she like broke. And there's like several moments in the movie where it's showing that kind of duality between her being very uncomfortable and her trying to keep it all together so she can repress her own emotions.
Yeah, and you get like the little flashbacks to her dad. I feel like a lot of times in those moments when she's like on the edge of breaking. But yeah, I just want to say I do not recommend the Silence of the Lambs 3D experience.
What is that?
I'm just kidding. I was just thinking of just a bad joke about the
like the Disney ride where you're going in. This part is like, real gross.
It's the 4DX thing where they like have the smells and the squirt water on you.
So she talks to Hannibal. So let's talk about Hannibal. The way he's kind of introduced, he like sits down, or she sits down, or maybe she doesn't. She just kind of walks into frame.
I think she sits in like a folding chair.
Yeah.
Because I think he's standing for a lot of it, and that's part of it, because he's like right up against the thing. Because there's the Silence of the Lamb novel, but then I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure there was another movie prior to this with Hannibal in it. I don't remember which one.
Well, it's like a prequel, but I think it came out after this movie. It's called like Red Dragon or like Hannibal Rising or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like him in Siberia or somewhere eating people and being crazy.
But yeah, he's an existing character that already exists, I feel like, to some extent in pop culture. I think the book was super popular.
Yeah. And I mean, the TV show, like the Hannibal that came out on like CBS, I think. I don't know. It's like, so there was one time where I was like, I can't sleep, and let's just look through the internet. And I fell down this hole, and I ended up at a Hannibal TV show ASMR, like rough cut of him just cooking people. And Jesus so Christ. It was like, I was so utterly repulsed, but at the same time I was like, this is oddly captivating. Just like he is in the movie, because I think Anthony Hopkins has like a really interesting way of portraying him, of being so courteous, so calm and collected. Like, he's very nice. He seems like a totally normal person until he's like, and like, I'm gonna eat you, and like, I kill people and I eat them. Even when he says it, it's sort of just kind of blasé, like, yeah, I kind of do that.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I feel like so much of this movie I'm thinking about is like what I understand like Hannibal Lecter to be without having seen the movie, and now like having seen the movie. And
what is the biggest difference, I guess, when you kind of think of this scene and like what you understood from just culture beforehand and then what you saw when you were in there?
I mean, I feel like Hannibal Lecter is like such an outsized figure, especially in the like true crime serial killer world, because that's like, he's like the serial killer, like the platonic ideal of what people think of as a serial killer, but he's like such a fantastical character that doesn't exist. And like the conceit, I think, is like, what if the smartest man in the world was a cannibal? You know, had an uncontrollable desire to kill and eat people. Which is super interesting. But when you're thinking about like I just feel like there's, with like serial killers, there's this, you know, people, they get portrayed or thought of as these like cold calculating geniuses. And like, I feel like that isn't a helpful way to think about them, because it kind of, I feel like it removes, I feel like it would go down a rabbit hole here. Removes like culpability from like police not catching them, because usually their victims are people that the police don't care about, and then it also
and in the case of the Zodiac, it was a police officer.
We don't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
right.
But I will say that, like, the thing that is interesting about this movie too is that when it pits Hannibal against both criminals and like police and people who are supposed to be at the top of their fields, like Chilton and Jack Crawford and all that kind of thing, he is always shown to be the more calm, the more collected, the more, like, in a lot of ways, like, the more he is not a servant to his emotions in any way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's like a couple of times where he does break, but when that happens, when it does break, he kind of breaks on the side of like, man, that was horrible. I'm sorry that happened to you. Let me help you in this moment as an apology for what just happened to you. It's like this like kind of weird decorum. And when you view that against like Chilton, who's like driven by his desire for fame and power and kind of like this menacing sort of cruelty over others, even though he's a doctor, or Buffalo Bill, who is sort of shown to be a little deranged in some way and sort of kind of incapable of dealing with the life that Bill is in. You know what I mean? Like,
Buffalo Bill comes off as more like impulsive and like quick to anger, and less, even, which I think is also like speaks to some of the more like nuanced stuff. Because I just with Buffalo, like the scene where, I know I'm jumping ahead, but where Clarice is finally in the house and catches him, and like once he knows that like something's up, he like immediately panics and like he's not this cool, calm, and collected guy that's like
it's not like in a Tarantino scene where everyone has the gun under the table and they're all looking at each other very calm and collected, and then everyone just starts shooting. It's more like, oh my god, they fucking got and in that way sort of is more human, I guess, and in a way that like Hannibal Lecter is not human, is more of like this, like you said, like the sort of serial killer kind of thing.
But even how he's like, I feel like I haven't seen the other Hannibal movies, so I don't know how he's portrayed in them.
I have a lot to say about those as well, because I think that the following movies really undoes a lot of the work of the first one. But keep going.
I was gonna say, like, his whole deal, like, I could see being portrayed more just as like a typical like horror movie icon, where he's the looming monster that's coming to get you. Where like in this movie, although he's not on screen that much, I do feel like he is like portrayed more as just like a human being versus like, but there's a little bit of both, I guess, too, because then he does, he has these scenes where he cuts people's faces off and splays the man up on the flags.
And he like literally uses his like teeth and claws as weapons. Like he becomes a monster,
right?
And is very animalistic in the way he does things. But it's sort of these wild swings between being completely collected and this, like, there. Again, we're skipping ahead a little bit. We'll come back. But there's that part where he's like walking over in that cell and he has the knife and he's just kind of like whistling and he's like, all right, officer, whatever, it's time. And then like the next time you see that officer, his face has been cut off and all of his organs have been like pulled out of his body and he's been like crucified. And you're like, holy shit.
Right. And you're like, how long was he?
Nobody saw that these people didn't come back for like an hour. But as we jump back, so Clarice goes and interviews Dr. Lecter and essentially is trying to get his ideas about what Bill might, like what his demographics are, what might, any indications of who Buffalo Bill might be. He sees through it immediately and is like fuck you, essentially. And outplays her when it comes to psychology because he can get into her head better than she can get into his, and essentially dismisses her after she tries, several times to try to goad him into giving her information. And you have that kind of thing. And again, this is a really interesting thing about it, is that when he does do the like, I ate his liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti, that was in order to scare her, but wasn't sort of a direct threat. You know, he was just like playing with her.
Right.
He was kind of like breaking down this person. And in the way that he's like kind of most scary is that he can kind of do that. Like he is able to break somebody down, and like we'll talk about it. It's like the next scene that we literally hear that he had like whispered to someone all night, and that person killed themselves the next day. Like,
Right. Yeah.
It's like he has kind of this like supernatural control over the psychology of others. And so she like is leaving. The guy next to Lecter in the cell has been jerking off and throws semen at her and splashes her in the face, and that's why the 4D experience is really not a ride that you should go to,
because it's just
Universal.
that scene.
It's just over and over, and you're like, please let me off, please.
Well, there's this. You get the bucket, like the bucket's coming at you.
Yeah.
It's like you're in the pit. You get the bucket.
Yeah.
It smells like pit. Just pit smells.
Yeah, and when I was on the ride, it was like a teenager running it, and the damn kid just kept pulling us through it. Like just it was like we would pull off, we would like try to get out of our seats, and then he'd just send us right back to the cum shot, you know. Anyway, so she gets like hit with this in this really both degrading but also very like gendered way of assaulting someone, right?
Yes.
It's like a man using something very masculine, I guess, to attack someone who is a woman, and Hannibal Lecter then calls her back and is like, I hate him, I hate that I'm here, I hate this place, I'm a civilized person, these are things that you might want to know, and like tells her a bunch of like things and sends her off. Basically sends her to a location that he kind of hints at.
Yeah, I feel like it's also like a little bit of a test too.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he gives
it's definitely
her
a test.
he gives her like a fake name, I think, and she figures out.
Yes.
I feel like it's a bit of a stretch. She figures something out and then goes to a random storage locker with like the guy who runs the storage locker. He's like has the driver. It was really. I didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah, me
there.
neither. It's like this old man who's like, yeah, it was done like 10 years ago. Oh, my driver's in there. And she's like, can you have the driver come help me? And he's like, nope. It's like, okay, you dick. There's like a person who's trying to get into this like very creepy like storage container you've just, I guess, kept closed for 10 years.
Yeah.
Very weird, but
there's a body in it. Or a head? Just a
there's
head.
Just the head.
Yeah.
And she is able to look into the person's like mouth and finds the moth, you know, that weird, you know, whatever.
The skeleton moth.
Yeah,
the thing from the poster.
Death's head moth,
Yeah,
apparently.
it's cool.
Yeah, very weird, very creepy. And she goes back to talk. She goes back to talk to Lecter first, and says that there's a man that is linked to Buffalo Bill, and offers the profile on who he thinks is the suspect who did that. So essentially trying to give information, and in return he wants to get the fuck away from Chilton, because apparently Chilton just sets up a TV and has like a priest sermon on, like a televangelist. Horrifying.
Which is like, yeah, that's like Abu Ghraib torture shit.
Yeah, exactly.
that we were doing. It's like Guantanamo Bay shit.
Yeah,
like,
this isn't even the Bush years yet. But yeah, and in that time as well, we learn a couple things. One, that Jack Crawford sent her into the cell with Hannibal without much sort of prep, because he like didn't really trust her, essentially.
Yeah.
And also we learn that the person who flung the cum at her was basically tortured by Hannibal Lecter, by him sort of like destroying his already fairly fragile psyche with his psychological talents, and that person also took their own life. So it's like you get to hear some stuff where you're like, oh, shit. But again, this is weird. The weird thing about it is that you don't feel like, oh, man, Hannibal's terrible. You're like, oh yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah,
that guy was
like,
gross.
Yeah, that guy's Hannibal. He kind of did everyone a solid, right?
Yeah. It's like, is he really the bad guy? Yeah, and so then they are all setting down because Lecter demands sort of like a deal with Starling, offering clues in exchange for him to like interview her as well, because she keeps going back being like, I need some clues, man. I really need some clues. And he's like, okay, I'll ask questions about you, your personal life, and then you can ask questions from me.
Says, I'm going to ask you why the movie's called this. She's like,
what does the Silence of the Lambs mean?
Yeah.
Why are lambs important? Yeah, and we kind of learn that Clarice actually does open up to him, and shows like a vulnerable feminine side. Again, I think going to the movies sort of flipping masculinity and femininity on its head. So like a lot of masculine traits like Chilton are shown to be, destructive, punitive, and ultimately kind of obstructive to actually helping people. And then Clarice being vulnerable and telling this story about how her father passed away and she was really sad about that, and then she had to live with her aunt and uncle, and Lecter was like, and he like fucked you, right? Like immediately went to like sexual assault, and she's like, no, they're great people, but they like slaughtered lambs, and I could hear them screaming, and she tried to escape with one, but they like found her and brought the lamb back and killed it anyway, and then her uncle was mad at her because she let all the lambs out. Fucked up. It was weird. It's like a really sad story.
Yeah.
She's like, it's a great performance by Jodie Foster. Like her telling that monologue, very good. Very good.
Did she win the Oscar? She probably did, right? I think this movie won like 1 million Oscars.
Yeah, it definitely was an awards season darling. But it's just like really interesting to me that because she tells this very vulnerable weakness that and this like fear, and the fact that she is like empathetic and can't get that out of her head, that she still has nightmares about it, then Hannibal Lecter's like, thank you, like you opened up to me in a real way, and he helps her for it, and it's sort of like, hey, this is some information. Chilton though eavesdrops and kind of reveals that Clarice's offer of like going in and saying like, hey, I'll get you transferred out of here, you'll have this island that you can walk on, it's great, it's awesome, you'll love it there, is all a lie that Crawford kind of sent her in with. And he is like, hey, if you actually help me advance my career, I'll actually do something for you, kind of thing. But he's a huge dick about it, and we hate him.
The worst. Yeah. And then he gets transferred. It's like a high school gym where they send him or something.
Yeah, it's sort of like a post office or like town hall or something feeling kind of thing.
That whole set is fascinating. It's like, I feel like that's just the spectacle of it all, really. Like,
yeah, and it kind of relates to who Hannibal is, right? Because even when he has this the stone sort of prison cell that he's in, he has sketched these beautiful like Vienna landscapes and like a view in Paris and all that kind of stuff from memory. And when he's there, he's kind of surrounded in a way of like he's able to live out his sort of ideals, which is like beauty, grace, and kind of etiquette, which is then drastically counterbalanced by him being a horrible monster.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he gets thrown in the weird mask and the straitjacket and carted out to the senator because the senator's daughter has been kidnapped by Buffalo Bill. Oh no! And we see that like very early on. Did you also notice that there's like the cat in the window, and it's her cat, the woman's, and that it's never resolved what happens to that cat?
Oh no, I didn't know that. But I will say, the scene, the introduction of her character, the senator's daughter, I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
It's just like a very small thing, but I feel like it was a very good performance by the actor. It just opens with her singing Tom Petty in the car, and it's just this very like natural performance of like, that's how I sing in the car. And I'm like, oh my God, she's just like me.
Yeah, and like, and it is interesting too because the way that Buffalo Bill like gets her is that she is trying to be helpful, and again, it is this sort of masculine, like hateful, destructive energy preying upon this sort of like nice, vulnerable, emotionally kind energy. It just does feel sort of like, man, this world just steps on kindness wherever it can.
And I think Buffalo Bill is like an amalgamation of multiple different well-known serial killers.
Yeah, like he had the cast on and stuff, and I think that's like, I forget who it
Ted
was.
Bundy or
like Bundy would like pretend to be injured and be like, "Hey, can you help me?" And then like club people.
Erin's screaming at the recording right now because she knows she definitely knows which one it was.
Erin is another one of our improv troupe as well. So
and
shouts out,
partner.
Shouts out to Erin. So where were we? Oh yeah, so he gets transferred after basically being really gross to the senator. Did you really get that? I don't really understand why he did it.
Oh, yeah. I feel like, I don't know. I mean, a status thing, maybe.
Like
just
a power?
like, yeah, because he's in this, like, extremely vulnerable, compromised position.
Yeah,
they're literally,
in the straitjacket, in the Tom Hardy
They're
mask.
just wheeling him out, He's doing the Bane voice.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, I'm going to crash this plane. What does he say? You're a big man for you. No, and he... I don't know. I mean, I feel like he's just also kind of like a little shitheel and like can't help himself.
Yeah, he just can't help poking her.
Yeah.
But it's weird because he's not like that to Clarice. I mean, he is at the beginning, I guess. And I guess it's like whenever he finds somebody wanting, I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, this is exactly the problem with, I think, the culture around this movie. Like you said again, Clarice is the main character, and yet we're like psychoanalyzing Hannibal Lecter because he's like,
right,
weirdo, but also,
but also I feel like the point is that he's like inscrutable because he's like he's a walking contradiction. He's like the biggest contradiction.
Yeah,
so, who knows why he does anything?
One thing that we sort of skipped over too was that they went to one of the victims' homes because they find a victim, and they go to like the funeral home, I guess, where the coroner is.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting scene where all of the policemen are just kind of like, again, it's like all of these men and the camera makes sure to lock eyes with every single one of them. And it's just Clarice sort of like standing in the background, like looking at all of them, and they're all just sort of discounting her. And even Jack
Crawford.
Jeremy Crawford or whatever, was like, oh, she's a woman, so she can't handle it, so maybe we should talk alone or something.
Right.
And she even kind of uses it herself at one point, being like, hey guys, I'm just a little woman, can everyone leave?
Yeah.
Like, I guess we'll respect you.
But then they even have the scene, like Jack apologizes after, is like, oh, he's just saying that because of like the audience we were with. I don't remember what she's basically like, never do that again.
Yeah, she's like, that fucking sucked.
Yeah.
But also it's interesting because this is again one of those moments where you're like, is Crawford like an asshole? Is he a bad person? Like, is he also one of these men, Yeah.
And I feel like his character is like on this weird line because there's also I think too in the book their relationship is more overtly sexual. I can't remember if she actually sleeps with him or if it's just that he wants to sleep with her. And I feel like the like subtext is there in the movie, but I'm glad that it's not text. Yeah. And in fact, I kind of almost disagree because like near the end, there's a moment where it shows this very non-sexual handshake. Yes.
And it kind of contrasts from when she gets the papers from Hannibal Lecter and he kind of like lets his finger like rub on her hand.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, that's true. No, yeah, he's like almost more. I mean, I feel like Jack Crawford's almost more like a father type figure.
Yeah, he's like a very non-sexual, whereas almost everybody else sexualizes her.
Yeah.
Even sort of. Well, I mean, like, I don't even. There's a tenderness with Hannibal by the end, but I don't know whether or not it's sexual or not. I mean, spoiler alert: future movies make it very sexual. Or even the future books, it's like. She falls in love with him and then he like kills and eats her, which is like not what is.
No, that's upsetting.
Yeah.
I think the what was I gonna say? The Jack Crawford thing. I think the only time he really like delves into that is like when he admits that like I sent you in there because I thought an attractive young woman would help get to Hannibal more. Yeah. But it is I feel like it is also more just about. Not necessarily how he perceives her, but about like just knowing her how she's perceived in the world she's in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because he kind of weaponizes it almost, and sometimes without her consent.
Yeah.
Which is not great.
Yeah.
And again, makes you feel like, are you a good person? Are
Yeah,
you a
well,
bad
because he's just
person?
kind of he's. I mean, he's kind of just controlling, or he's. I feel like a lot of the movie he's using her. You know, like,
Well, I mean, that's another theme of the movie is like manipulation, and like
Yeah.
everyone is manipulating each other,
Right.
And manipulating how people perceive each other or using the perception. I mean, like the main thing about Buffalo Bill is that Bill wants to be perceived differently, and that is why.
Yeah.
You know, he's making a woman suit. Did we ever talk about that? That he's like slowly skinning parts of people and making a woman suit, and so like the kidnapped girl is in this well, and he's like, "Hey, lotion up because I need your skin to be soft." Also, she's super resourceful at the end, and I want to talk about it. But first, here we go. So yeah, then like Starling kind of analyzes. Or like goes back to Hannibal Lecter, even though she's sort of taken off the case, and he's, you know, has his classical music and he's hanging out, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't think I'd see you again. How are you?" And she's like, "You fucking lied to everyone. It's like that name you gave was a anagram for fool's gold. You're fucking with everyone." And he's like, "Yep." And she's like, "Where do I actually have to go?" And he basically talks her through, "Hey, you idolize things you see every day, like things that are familiar,"
Right.
Which helps her kind of narrow in geographically, like, because there is no rhyme or reason to where the bodies are dumped, except for the first one, which is like taken care of slightly differently. And so she, like, essentially using his sort of last bit of, you know, counsel, like narrows in a range of probability of where the murderer would be.
Yeah. Well, then she also goes and starts talking to the people that the first victim knew.
Yeah.
Because that's when she finds the patterns and the dress patterns and ties it back to the pieces of skin that were cut out of the body and realizes that he's
making a suit.
Constructing a skin suit, which again, it's a movie, but also like the way I guess it feels like they reach these conclusions quickly. You know, it's like a eureka moment where she's like, dress pattern, skin suit. And you're like, would you? A
plus B equals skin suit. And she does go, but she also gets a call with Jeremy where she's like, I figured it out. He's making a skin suit. And he's like, yeah, we're about to go like kill him right now.
He's like, we're in a helicopter right now.
we're going in. And the helicopter goes down. They go into this house and they find that nothing is there.
Which, I mean, I feel like it's a trope that is done more frequently now, but like the bait and switch is beautiful. When you have all the guys, you see the house from the outside, you have all the guys, and then I think they cut to Buffalo Bill on the inside, and they show
do some
all the guys.
interesting camera work where it's very much the language of film is saying they are in the same place as Buffalo Bill because they're cutting back and forth so like smoothly between the two locales that you're like, oh, obviously he's there, right? It's like that's the place. And
you think Clarice is just going to talk to, like, I think an acquaintance, like a woman, an acquaintance of someone.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
like
you get
the first victim's friend in Chicago or something.
Yeah, and then you get the door opens and it's Buffalo Bill, and you're like, run!
Yeah, because she's like, he like knew this seamstress or worked for the seamstress with this guy. And she's like, okay, I guess I'll go talk to her, and opens it up, and it's Buffalo Bill. And you're like, oh my God. Very scary. And at this moment, it kind of cuts away to Hannibal's escape, which is maybe the most action and gory part of the movie.
Yeah. That all happens before all this, right? Because there is a scene
during, right?
I think it's before, because there is a scene where after he's escaped, or no, maybe that's the very end.
That's the very end. That's after she gets the medal. I think this is happening in the same place, because the first time we get her reaction to his escape is at the like award ceremony, where her friend is like, hey, did you hear that he escaped? And she's like, yeah, bad.
But she's also like, there's some point where they're like, we don't think he'll come after you, Clarice.
Yeah.
Or maybe she says it. I don't know.
Yeah, she's like, I mean, I don't know, but I don't think he would, sort of thing. It's not even really said. It's just sort of like she doesn't seem worried about it, and then he kind of tells her at the end, but we'll get there. This escape scene is wild. Very cool. Well done. Yeah. Very cruel, and it immediately, I think that it's really interesting that throughout the entire movie, it's kind of setting up Hannibal to be sort of like an anti-hero, where he's, you know, put upon and people are cruel to him and he's awful. And yeah, he's like spooky sometimes, but he hasn't really done anything bad. Like he's actually done some nice things for Clarice and been fairly kind in some ways.
Yeah.
That is like, that illusion is completely pulled away in this scene where he, again, super brilliantly has stolen a pen from Chilton because he's a fucking idiot, and unlocks his handcuffs when they come to give him dinner.
Yeah, and they send in the yokels to give him dinner. They're like, let's get the two oldest,
the oldest kind of like nearest to retirement cops. And the thing that's kind of sad about it to me, and it kind of like, maybe this is brilliant, I don't know. They set it up so that like these cops, in comparison to all the other cops and people who have dealt with Hannibal, are pretty nice to him. They're like, hey, Hannibal, like, hey, we got you your second dinner.
Yeah.
Like, you know the deal. Can you lock yourself up, sir? And he does. And then they come in and they give it to him. And they're just sort of like treating him well.
Yeah.
And he unlocks the cuffs and beats one guy to death with a club. And then grabs another guy and like starts eating his face. Like, just like biting into his like fucking face, and blood is everywhere. And you just see this, there's this one shot of him above the guard who he's beating to death with the club, and he's just kind of swinging it almost like a sort of like a conductor to the music.
Yes. Yep.
And it is so inhuman and really insane. You know, it's like, oh, this person that we thought was like misunderstood, maybe bad, like was bad, but like was okay to everyone that we like as an audience, is horrifying. He is a monster.
No, he bad.
He's real bad.
Yeah. And then again, well, that's like the first bait and switch, I guess, too, because then you cut away, you get that, and then you cut away, and then it's all from the perspective of the police figuring out something's going on, watching the elevator. Then they find they think they find the one cop, but turns out someone under that mask.
What a great, I mean, like, this is a better heist movie than Ocean's 11. He basically like cuts off someone's face and puts it on himself, and then like slows his heart down or something, so that they're like, okay, throw him in the ambulance, and then he like gets up and then kills everyone in the ambulance and like drives away. Very scary. And he kills a lot of innocent people, and he's not a nice guy. We learned that very quickly. But Clarice, on the other hand, is now in the house with Buffalo Bill, and it's terrifying because she slowly realizes who he is. And then there's this like pretty dramatic sort of hunting scene where she goes down, she finds the girl who's just like screaming, super terrified. And I mean, the girl's like been... Whereas in some horror films, you're like, oh, come on, why are you doing this? You're going to get yourself killed. She, like, worked her ass off not to die.
Yeah, everything she does, I'm, like, totally believable. That's how a human would react in this situation.
Yeah, she, like tries to goad the dog down into the well and, like, threatens the dog so that Buffalo Bill won't skin her alive.
And then gets, when Clarice comes down there, she's like, oh, my God, thank God somebody came to rescue me. And Clarice is like, not now, I gotta go. And she, like, no! She's like, you bitch.
They murderer's house.
And you're like, that's an honest reaction.
Yeah. It's a great reaction. I really like it. And so, they go down, and there's this, like, Bill cuts the lights, and it's this pretty scary sort of moment of... And honestly, this is my least favorite part of the film. One, it's very scary, especially when I was a kid. I was like, this is terrifying. But it's basically from Bill's, like, night vision goggles that he has. And he is... Again, we're using he because... we fucking don't know what Bill is.
I guess they use he in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. But it's sort of video gamey in that you can kind of see his hands sometimes. I don't know if I really like that, but
no, I don't know. It works.
It works.
He's like about to like touch her hair. It's just this weird thing because it's like he could he could like grab her and kill her, but there's this weird. He does seem to have this weird like reluctance or like fascination.
Yeah.
Where he's like just like doesn't really know exactly how to react.
Yeah, and he's in he's a place of power, right? He's like yeah, and he turns and clicks the gun that he has, and Clarice, trained awesome FBI agent, I guess, is like, I hear a click, I drop to the ground, shoot him 7 times.
Yeah, just unload my clip on him.
Yeah, just bang, 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 and then Bill just falls and is dead, and then the day is saved, the police come, everyone gets brought out, the girl gets returned to her family, and Clarice is getting this like graduation medal because she's out of training, she's going in, and then Jeremy, is it Jeremy or Jack Crawford?
Jack Crawford.
Jack Crawford. I said Jeremy. Jeremy Crawford is a D&D designer.
Of course.
Oh, damn it. But yeah, Jack Crawford is like, you did a good job. Put her there. And then for the first time as equals, they kind of shake hands. Yeah. And it's like a very non-sexual thing. It's sort of like she has elevated herself out of that.
Right.
In a weird way. I wonder what that means.
Who knows? But then, ring, ring, ring.
Ring, ring, ring. She gets a phone call.
Yeah.
And it's Hannibal, her BFF, who is in some other country. Tropical. Looks very nice.
Yeah. He's got a great wig.
He has a great wig. Oh my God, that hat with the wig that's built into the hat is so good. And he's just like hanging out in a restaurant, and he's like, don't worry, like, great job, you did it. And she's like, are you gonna come kill me? And he's like, no, world's great with you in it. And then he's like, but I gotta go, I'm meeting an old friend for dinner. And it is Chilton walking down the street with his little guard, and Hannibal just sort of lazily walking behind him with his hat and wig on. He's gonna kill that guy.
He's gonna kill him and eat him. Yeah.
And thus begins Hannibal Part 2.
Yeah.
So I think that the movie's interesting. It's like very clear why it was so culturally important. It is moving. It is very like it kind of like arrests your anxiety like out of your control, and it's just like, okay, everyone here is creepy, everyone here is awful. I hate that being in this position of weakness in this world, and I think in that way it really kind of shows like what women have to deal with on a day-to-day business basis, and also kind of shows like the difference between perception and reality, which I think is really interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the politics of Buffalo Bill. I mean, like we said before, I feel like the script is more nuanced than the movie is when it comes to him. I don't know. I don't know if this is sort of like this movie. The movie like is a very good movie. Would I watch it and entirely endorse it in today's day and age? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm like, it's a fantastically well-made movie, and it's one of those things that I think too. It's just like the cultural legacy of it almost undoes, any good or bad intention that the filmmakers had because of just like, is it Disclosure? Is the documentary? I think on Netflix that's about trans representation in media, and that's a huge one. And even I was listening to a different podcast talk about this movie, and had a trans person on talking about it, and they were even saying like they felt like at the time like there was so little trans representation that people even just perceived Buffalo Bill as just being gay, or not just being gay. Sorry to all our listeners, but
he's so much more.
in just so much of the backlash and the jokes, was directed at just gay men rather than even
look
just
at that gay man who wants to wear a dress.
Exactly. And so I did, and this is anecdotal. This came up on the podcast as well, though, that apparently Jonathan Demme, the director, felt so guilty about how the Buffalo Bill character, became in the culture that his next film was Philadelphia, and I think he expressly wanted to have a story with a a gay protagonist who is
Well, I mean that shows the politics of the time that he's like, I feel so bad about what I did to gay men in this movie that I'm gonna do something else in this movie.
Exactly.
It's
Again,
like,
it's a straight,
this is
straight
completely-
cis man being like, here, let me make it up. Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is gay
Hanks?
and has AIDS.
Look,
And you're
everyone
like-
loves Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
He's gay, just like Buffalo Bill.
Right. And you're like, okay.
It's like
but yeah, again, you're like, well, for like the early 90s, it could be worse, I guess.
Yeah, it's still like in a place where you're like, this is watchable, but man, they had the opportunity to do something really interesting, or like something that feels a little bit more not timeless, but you know what I mean, like modern, I guess, with that character, and they didn't. Yeah, so that is the first course. Why don't we go on to the second course, which is Ratatouille? Oh man, I love this movie. It makes my heart feel warm.
It's a great movie. Again, another movie that I had not seen all the way through, but
That just blows my mind. Like Ratatouille is one of the Pixars that I just feel like everybody has seen and then locked away in a memory box of like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie.
yeah, I don't know why I missed that one because I've seen all the other Pixars.
Yeah.
Of all the early Pixars, I've fallen off now. I haven't seen that many of the new ones.
Cars 3.
Yeah, well, obviously, Cars 3 is the best. But no, and I feel like Ratatouille gets brought up as like underrated best Pixar movie.
It's so good. It's such a standalone, fun, nice, heartwarming story.
Yeah.
About being yourself, just like Silence of the Lambs.
It's great. I feel like I love to. I mean, it's 2007. Like that's so long ago now, and I feel like the Pixar thing now. You know, Pixar has its own cultural legacy and idea of like what a Pixar movie is. But just like watching it, you're like, oh, this is like when they were like defining what a Pixar movie is.
It feels very like. It definitely still feels like a Pixar movie, but it feels unique. You know what I mean? Like if you watch Toy Story and Ratatouille back to back, you'd be like, these are completely different movies. Whereas if you watch some of the more modern ones back to back, you're like, okay, yeah, it's Pixar.
There's a theme.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what I miss about like some of these types of movies. I feel like now the current, at least like one of the trends with Pixar is to take these like abstract concepts and like anthropomorphize them. So you have like Inside Out and like Soul and like I feel like interesting movies, but I feel like the thing I love about Ratatouille is it's like it's about a rat that can cook, and then like there's so much more. Like the human element comes out of that, but it's not like
instead of personifying innately human things like a soul or emotions or whatever, it is literally personifying like the thing of like, hey, this rat has a dream.
And you're like, I just want him to achieve his dream.
And like, who can? Why does everyone say that he has to be like a rat? He can be whatever he wants to be.
And like you get the like little taste of the like Pixar stuff of like the scene at the beginning where he's eating and you see all the fireworks and how he experiences like that
actually feels very Soul to me.
Yes, that's very Soul and like Inside Out. But you just get like the little bit of that, and you're like, that's such a cool way to portray that. And then it's nestled into this like grander story.
So Ratatouille, it's about a rat named Remy who learns to cook from watching as like he doesn't like being a thief essentially as a rat, stealing food and bringing it back to this colony. His dad's sort of a hyper masculine guy, seeing the parallels between this and Silence of the Lambs. But he's like has such a good nose and has such a good palate.
Yes.
That he becomes like the poison sniffer, essentially making sure that everyone is safe, but he hates it because he wants to do other stuff. But then when he's like inside this human's house, this old lady who later reveals herself to be completely insane, self-destructive to a wild degree. But she always has on like essentially the Julia Child of this world, which is what's his not Gaston, what's his name? Gusteau.
Anyone can cook.
Anyone can cook, and he learns how to cook from reading Gusteau's Anyone Can Cook.
So I thought about this today. The thing I love about this movie is that the implication is that any rat could learn how to read. they're just not
and talk
yeah,
and like
they're
not
just
talk
well
but
they don't
listen, I
yeah
guess.
but they're just not interested in it. Like Remy, they don't like really, other than like his fine palate, he doesn't have like special powers as a rat.
He's not super hyper intelligent or whatever. He's just a rat
and he's
who
curious,
likes human stuff.
Yeah.
It's great. And yeah, so then we kind of go through, he learns how to cook and is trying to get his stupid brother to like taste. And so he's trying to cook this thing for him, and he just needs some spices. So he goes back into the person's house, and the old lady wakes up, immediately takes out like a hunting rifle and just starts shooting up her house because she hates these fucking rats. It's wild to me, like literally horrifying. She comes back in like a World War I exterminator like gas mask.
I forgot
has
about
like
that.
the poison that she's trying to kill after she literally collapses her ceiling, which to be fair was a rat's nest. And they all have to escape in the boats.
Yeah. And this movie was rated G too, which I was like, this movie that's not even the only scene with a gun too. There's a gun that pops up later. But again, just like knowing this movie, I was like, I didn't even know there was parts of this movie that didn't take place in Paris. So I'm like, I was surprised by how much little backstory you get.
Yeah,
from the
I
beginning.
mean, it's really interesting, like the how it kind of at first you're like, this could be anywhere essentially, except it's in a small town, I guess, countryside. And then when they get washed away into the sewer, he loses his entire family. They all go down, and he wasn't fast enough because he had to go save the cookbook, which honestly, not the smartest move.
Not the smartest move, but also, too, thinking about watching, if I'd seen this as a kid, the scene of him losing his family is like traumatizing because it's just, they just get out of reach, but you can still kind of hear him, and you're like, they're so close. He can obviously catch them. Yeah. And then you get to the split, and you're like,
oh no, which way to go?
He's not
and he
gonna
just
find them.
misses them. But you know what, Patrick? He may lose his family, but he finds a life of cooking and adventure.
This is true. This is
true.
true.
So he takes the left passage in this drainage pipe, and he gets shunted down into the sewer system of an undescribed location, where he reads the cookbook back to front and starts hallucinating Gusteau being like, why are you here? Why aren't you going upstairs?
I feel like
that's my Gusteau, by the way.
Which is better than 99% of the French accents in this movie for the people that bothered to do them.
Yeah, I mean,
fascinating.
The main character, other than Remy, is named Alfredo Linguini.
Alfredo, which again, that's a first draft name.
Yeah, that's like a placeholder of like, I mean, if it doesn't work out, that's fine.
Yeah.
And he kind of like crawls out of the sewer to find food, and he finds Gusteau's kitchen. He finds out that he's in Paris. And also, as he's like going through that apartment complex, we get a lot of weird like tableaus of like French culture, I guess. Like there's that one with the woman with a gun and the guy being like, ah, and then a gunshot goes off and then they're kissing.
Yes. I'm so confused.
I want to see that Pixar movie. Also, how did she get a gun? This is France,
I
not
know.
America.
Why does everyone have guns?
But yeah, and she kind of like, he sees all these different people living their lives, and then he pops out, finds Gusteau's, and like starts witnessing the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Enter Linguini. Man, I have to say, Linguini is very pathetic.
I was gonna say, he kind of sucks.
He's not a good.
He mostly sucks.
Yeah, the best parts of his life is when a rat is controlling everything that he does.
Yes, he doesn't even. I was kind of thinking, well, by the end, he'll have learned something and will know how to cook. He doesn't really ever learn how to cook.
And he also doesn't really show an interest. He's actually more into letting a rat learn how to puppet his body around by pulling his hair than learning just how to cook.
Right. And there is, he's relatable in some way. I feel like it's he's got imposter syndrome. Yeah. He's in this French kitchen where he doesn't know what he's doing. And
he's lost so many jobs.
Yeah.
He's lost so many jobs.
He's a Nepo baby.
Yeah, he goes in, he presents this letter to the cook, the head chef, who is...
What is his name?
Oh, God.
He's
awful. It starts with like a K, right? What's his name?
But yeah, he... Yeah, he brings in the letter that is his mom was Gusteau's lover. Which do they say lover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like never married,
Right.
never like family. The guy's name is Skinner, Chef Skinner. Which
Really?
I did not catch that name. That feels like a very
No.
they're always like head chef.
Yeah.
But he is awful and is essentially like trashing Gusteau's name because he doesn't have an ounce of creativity in him. So he's instead making these stupid racist freezer meals. Oh man, this is, I mean, both of these movies, another thing similar about them, they both have one moment where you're like, ooh, that doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
So yeah, he kind of presents this letter, and the other chefs already have hired him, and he's like, what, you hired someone in my kitchen? And they're like, as a garbage boy. And he's like, yeah, whatever, okay. He finds out later that the letter says that he is Gusteau's son. And actually there's only 1 month left on the will, that if he comes into the limelight and says like, I'm Gusteau's son, he inherits everything. But if he doesn't for 1 more month, then the sous chef Skinner gets everything. And so Skinner starts falling deeply into a paranoid state. And they find a rat in the kitchen and they say, Linguini, go kill it. And he runs out to go kill it.
Yes. So this is the scene. I mentioned it on the thing. I had not seen this movie, but as soon as we got to this scene in the movie where Remy is looking down on the skylight and he falls in, there's the beautiful scene of him running around the thing, and eventually then he takes him out. Anyways, all this whole scene, for some reason I had downloaded on my iPod video and I watched it over and over, but was never interested enough to be like, hey Mom, can we get Ratatouille from the Red Box?
It's a 5-minute long scene that you were like, I know everything about this. Next he's gonna run into this cart, and I was like, what? You just watched this on a literal like 2-inch iPod screen?
Is that and Joe Dirt, just watching those over and over. Which coincidentally Joe Dirt has a very bad Buffalo Bill joke in it.
It does?
Full circle. Yeah, he gets like kidnapped by a Buffalo Bill type.
Oh,
I don't remember the exact jokes they make, but I'm sure it doesn't age well.
Yeah, I mean,
otherwise, Joe Dirt, 10 out of 10.
Perfect movie.
Yeah.
So he also, but Remy, a big thing we forgot is that Linguini like bumps the soup and it spills, and then he just starts flinging anything into the soup to fix it, to like reconstitute the soup. And Remy's trying to escape, but then it's like, oh no, he fucked up the soup. Let me help. And he fixes the soup, but even in a way that is even better than before. And everyone loves it. And everyone's like, fuck yeah, soup.
Give us the soup.
Yeah, give us the soup. And so he goes out to kill Remy, and then is like, man, I need this job. I can't lose this job. Wait, you can understand me? And then Remy's like, yeah. And he's like, and you can cook? And he's like, yeah. And so then he's like, I'm going to let you out. And he lets him out, and Remy bolts. But then, being a true hero, he stops running, turns around, and witnesses Linguini in all of his pathetic sort of wimpy glory. And he comes back and is like, okay, we'll figure this out. Thus begins this sort of scene of them trying to figure out how to cook together. Eventually they do. He pulls on his hairs and can puppet him around.
Yeah, again, just something that's so ubiquitous. The rat in the hat pulling the hair. I feel like it gets referenced so much.
I mean, we just had an Oscar season in which the lead movie had Ratatouille.
Yeah, just like a big plot point in the movie.
Yeah.
But just watching it play out in real time, you're just like,
what the fuck?
This is cinema. Where he just yanks on his hair, his arm moves, and you're like, this tracks.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
It's also just, if you really think about it, horrifying.
Yeah.
That you could be puppeted around by whatever got on your head.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Is it like did he grab just the right hairs?
I don't know. It feels like Linguini's hair is connected to his brain or something.
Yeah.
Like you yank on a hair and it actually physically moves a body part, as though, like you said, on marionette strings.
Yeah.
Very scary. But yeah, so then he in a single night learns how to cook by pulling this man's hair.
Well,
which
yeah,
is pretty impressive.
Well,
honestly.
Remy already knew how to cook. It's
It's more about
puppeting,
piloting this person. And they start cooking together, and they become better at it. And eventually, Chef Skinner, who's like, "Fuck this guy, let's get him out." Serve the sweetmeats. Gives him to send out like a bad recipe. That's terrible, and Remy fixes it yet again. 2-0. Remy wins. Skinner sucks. I also love that like Skinner is deeply paranoid and just keeps seeing rats everywhere.
Yeah,
very funny.
Yeah, and it quickly goes from he knows he's suspicious of there being a rat in the kitchen, which is understandable.
Yeah, because there are rats in every kitchen.
Yes, which also I don't know if this is in my head the pitch for Ratatouille. That's the starting point. Is in Paris, every restaurant has rats, even the fanciest 5-star restaurant you can imagine.
And they're cooking.
Yeah. And they're cooking. And they're the ones doing the cooking, which I love. And again, it's like how it plays out in Everything Everywhere All at Once, where you take this morsel of an absurd idea and then just play it to its logical conclusion. Yeah. And I just love that.
Yeah, it's really great. So that we find out that Skinner has been making all of these sort of frozen.
Yeah,
meals,
well, they're styled super close to which one? It wasn't Amy's.
Yeah,
Amy's
they are.
burritos. Weirdly.
Yeah, I always think about that too. Where I'm like, I kind of want an Amy's burrito. Look at that. But it has burritos. He has Chinese food. He has all these things, and they have Gusto kind of mocked up in all of these kind of ethnic clothes, which is not the good.
No.
It's a bad board.
But I guess it's based in reality because you've got like Newman's Own, even the Trader Joe's. You've got.
I mean, I guess Newman's Own, like one of the salsas has him in like a sombrero or whatever.
There's Trader Jose's and then Trader Ming's.
Oh boy!
Come on, Trader Joe's.
Yeah. But yeah, so then Skinner has a complete freak out in front of his lawyer, and the lawyer's like, "What the fuck is wrong with this guy?" And he's like, "Just give me a hair, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out." And they find out that he is in fact the son of Gusto.
Mm-hmm. His blood runs in his veins.
Yep. Turns out everyone can cook except for Gusto.
Yeah, he didn't get no hereditary talent.
Yeah, and so while this is happening, one of the lady chef, what's her name?
I was gonna say Celine, but voiced by Janine Garofalo, doing a wild French not wild. She's doing her best for a French accent.
Who is it? What is her name?
Is it not Celine or something? But Colette, yes, Colette.
Who is a badass in this movie and teaches Remy how to like cook like a chef.
Yeah, she will.
And also, again, very much like Silence of the Lambs, there's a lot of stuff in here of like, you think that I made it to a 5-star kitchen and am able to deal with these asshole men all the time by being soft? No.
Yeah, very much so. And even Remy is dismissive of her, and I'm like, that's a little sexist of you, Remy. Yeah, she knows what she's doing. She's worked here longer than you have. Yeah, but yeah, no, she's a badass. She rides motorcycles. She's got a leather jacket, and it's also like kind of, you're like, did she fall in love with Linguini, or did she fall in love with Remy? Because you're like, what do you see in there?
Much like B movie. Is she trying to fuck an animal?
Fuck that rat. That's where I was hoping we were getting at.
That's why I actually agreed to watch this movie.
Yeah, it's like, here we go.
Yeah.
It is, though. I mean, they ride the motorcycle away. They definitely go fuck. I feel like this is probably, I'd have to think about other Pixar movies, but like, for a G movie,
overtly sexual.
Yeah, it's just like very much like sex exists in this universe, which you can't say about every Pixar like kids movie. Yeah, and like I think that's good. It's a good thing.
Except for maybe Turning Red, which is about
that's true.
Periods and wanting
that's true.
to
I like that.
Kiss boys and things. Yeah. So. Linguini and Colette start to kind of fall in love. Remy starts feeling a little jilted. And his family, who he is reunited with, by the way, starts kind of showing up outside the restaurant being like, let us in the restaurant because I want to fucking eat some food. And he sort of lets them, you know,
Yeah.
in a moment of, you know, not great morals, I guess. I don't know. But also
it's his nature. He's a rat.
Well, this is the
It's
movie
kind of
tries to disprove that. But also, we were talking about this again, how Linguini is the true antagonist of this film. He's
the Hannibal actor of this movie.
He does not once like pay Remy in any sort of fashion. He sort of like gives him little bits of food, but like
yes, he scolds him for stealing, and you're like,
yeah, it's like fuck you, dude. He literally has made your he like when we meet Linguini, his apartment is a shithole, like,
but has a view of the Eiffel Tower.
Has a view of the Eiffel Tower. But now he has a beautiful, like, 2-story apartment in downtown Paris with a view of the Eiffel Tower. And it's like just wild to me that he is so mean to Remy, who is the only reason why he has amounted to anything in his life. But
that's Ratatouille 2. Or Ratatouille with the number 2 is the rats go on strike.
Oh yeah,
pitching it.
Let's do it.
we need a labor Pixar movie. That's the one topic they haven't covered yet.
I wonder why they haven't. What do you think that? I mean,
it's because they're owned by Disney.
Yeah. Can you imagine Disney putting out a movie that's like pro-union?
Well, they did. Technically, they made Andor, which Andor rules. Yeah. Is like space communism. So
yeah, that is true. And so one thing, this is the part of the movie that's the one that I was like, ooh, does not hold up, is that he goes back into Skinner's office when he's trying to find the key to let his family go and eat all the food. And he finds the note that says that Linguini is the heir, and he sees that all of the I don't know, are they called fat boys when you have the big...
I think it's like a brand name.
Yeah, it's like a cardboard cutout of all of the Gustos in different, outfits. And to their credit, it was 2007, I guess. They don't have the Chinese food Gusto talk, but they do have the burrito Gusto talk, and that's not the good.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's a cringy moment. It's like, ooh, boy, that's a miss. That's a no from me, dog.
Yeah.
But as we move forward, they kind of get into another fight because Linguini totally jilts Remy to be like, not anybody can cook. It's in my veins. I'm Gusto's son. I'm the best. And he kind of starts getting a big head. And then Anton Ego, my favorite character in this
we haven't
film.
even talked about Anton Ego.
He's the best. He's my favorite fucking character.
He is the best. The production design for his apartment,
oh my god, it's so good. It's just like a big coffin. It's like a haunted house.
Right, because I commented on it. I was like, he's basically like, I feel like Gru aped his whole look, but I guess he's kind of like he's basically supposed to be like a Dracula.
Yeah, but he's a critic, so he's a vampire.
Yeah. And then,
but yeah, so this critic, Anton Ego, gets told that Gusto's is actually getting good again. And he's like, I said it was bad, so that means it is bad. And so he goes back and is like, okay, motherfucker, hit me with your best shot. You've been playing without a opponent. So, okay, I'm going to come back next Wednesday. We're going to have a little culinary showdown. But then Remy and Linguini have the falling out.
Yeah.
And his whole family comes in. He's like, you know what? Fuck Linguini. I'm going to let everyone eat everything in this motherfucking kitchen. Yeah. And then Linguini finds him and like starts to apologize, but then sees all the rats and is like, you're just like all the other rats, I guess.
Yeah.
There's some weird stuff here. Like, again, Linguini's a bad person. If you knew that this rat was super intelligent and great, and you just saw all the other rats trying to get food, and you're like, fuck you, fuck all these rats, you're a thief, you're a dirty little scoundrel, then that's not good, right? He's in the wrong there.
No, yeah. Linguini, he kind of, his ego gets to him, and he never really gets a full comeuppance. Yeah. I mean, does he have...
He kind of keeps falling forward into winning, you know?
Yeah. Again, he's a Nepo baby. Yeah. He just fails upward.
Yeah. And he... they have the big schism, but then he comes back and is like, I am going to help you. But then all the other chefs figure out that a rat has been
right. Or because When does he tell them? He tells them and then they all walk out.
Yeah, because Anton Ego is in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, just cook the food that you've cooked 100 times
Yeah.
before. And he's like, I don't know how. And so then Remy comes back and he's like, you know what, everyone? This is the cook. This rat. And because he's not a very inspiring speaker and because people probably thought he lost his goddamn mind, they all just leave.
Mm-hmm.
But then Colette, as she's leaving and crying, because she realizes that she fell in love with a rat and not a person, she like looks into a window and sees the book Everyone Can Cook and comes back and is like, okay, let's do this, I guess. And then all of the rats come back and they have kidnapped a health inspector.
Yes. Throw him in the deep freeze.
Which honestly is one of the best moments of the film of it's terrifying.
It is. Anything in the movie, though, where it's, the rats interacting with the humans and, like, a human reacting to seeing a, like, slightly anthropomorphized rat is, like, great. I just, like, give me more of that. When the bread biker guy hits the car and the bread just goes everywhere.
And he gives him, like, the finger pistols or whatever.
I love it.
It's really great, and like the dad's like, Delta Team, go! And, like they have made military squadrons within their thing that are trained to kidnap and store people. It's like, when has that come up before? And then at one point Skinner comes back to be like, the rat, who's cooking in here? They also grab him and throw him in the back. But then Remy makes Ratatouille. The name of the film. And Anton Ego tries the ratatouille, being like, are you kidding me? Peasant food? And he eats it, and he was like, oh, I was a peasant
Boy. I skinned my knees and my mom. Yeah, because it's, I mean, in my head, I'm like, why Ratatouille? Because I've had, like, knowing this movie too, I think I always assumed Ratatouille was like a pasta, and then my brother's made it before. It's really good, but it's like a side dish. It's like roasted vegetables.
Yeah, it's a dish that is made. The reason why it's considered a peasant dish is because people who can't afford meat will make Ratatouille.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
and it's kind of like a stew. You just kind of like put in what you have.
Yeah, and you kind of just like have these roasted vegetables in this stew. But Anton Ego's like, holy shit.
Right, and it breaks through. You find his little morsel of humanity that was still inside him.
Yeah, and he, Linguini, who's been waiting all the tables, comes out, and he's like, I guess you did it, Linguini. You beat me. You're the best. And he's like, no, it's not me. And he's like, okay. And then he's like, you have to wait until the end.
Yeah.
And then this Colette also goes out, and he's like, so you're the person.
He's like, no, not me either.
Nope, not me either. And then he goes back, and he finds out Remy, and they show him how the rat can cook.
Little chef.
And I have to say, like, Anton Ego, out of all of the characters in this movie, is the most like egalitarian, understanding person. Because he's not like, fuck you guys, what's going on, crazy, He's like, huh. Okay.
No, he obviously has high standards and taste, but at the end of the day, he's a food critic, and if the food is good,
he's like, I don't care.
He's there, and he invests.
Yeah, because he writes a really beautiful. I think it's my favorite part of the movie is
when they read the review.
Yeah, the review. Which is just really heartwarming and wonderful, and it's Bilbo Baggins who is that character we found out, right?
Yes, which is
wild. What range of that character?
Know.
He goes from Hobbit smoking dragon weed or whatever, and now he's a food critic in Paris.
Well, it's because in my head, he's got that like distinguished British actor voice, and so I was like, is that Ian McKellen, like Gandalf?
I thought it was too. I was like, wow, that's
or like Patrick Stewart. Like those were the two that like came to mind.
Proper posh accent, very good. He's one I think he's my standout star of this movie. Like Patton Oswalt is fine as Remy, like Remy's great, but I actually kind of like Remy best when he's miming. when he's like perceived as a rat, and so he's just sort of like doing squeaky stuff, and those are my favorite parts. But Anton Ego is just incredible. Well done, Bilbo. Your 103rd birthday or whatever really paid off your acting lesson. So he writes this really glowing review, but then they had to let the health inspector go, which is also, I feel like, Pixar's kind of hand wave of the awful truth of that those rats would have devoured those two people. They would have never been found. They would have been thrown out with the garbage.
They would have been cooked into the soup. It would have been in the soup.
And then we would be right back to Silence of the Lambs.
Yep. That's full circle.
Yeah, but at the very end, you find out that Anton Ego has invested in Remy's startup restaurant that he runs with Colette, and Linguini waits tables, and it has a really heartwarming, amazing ending of his family accepting him and truly allowing him to, pursue his passions. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Yeah. Beautiful movie.
Beautiful.
Beautiful ending. I want to go to Paris now.
I know. That was one thing I was like, I want to go to Paris. I want to meet all the nice rats.
Say hello.
Yeah. I want to go to one of these restaurants, say hello. Okay. So now we're at the portion of the podcast where we actually have to decide between these two movies, which one is the better culinary mentor. So what are your thoughts on these movies? As a pair, it's a very weird one. So
yeah. Well, I think there's if we're thinking about the theme, there's a couple questions. One's the question of who is the better mentor.
Yeah.
And both are very unconventional.
Because I kind of feel like Remy's imaginary Gusteau
is more of the mentor.
Is the mentor.
That's the thing, because Linguini never really learns to cook. He doesn't.
Linguini's a flop.
Yes, I guess he learns some lessons from Remy, but they're really beating him over the head with it.
Yeah.
But then even Hannibal Lecter, he's not necessarily teaching Clarice more.
He kind of is. He's kind of teaching her how to think about the case.
He's guiding her a little bit, I guess. But I feel like you're also kind of made to think that a lot of Clarice's skills are almost intuitive and inherent, and so she has a knack for this kind of stuff.
Definitely, but there's also definitely parts of the movie where she goes to Hannibal being like, I cannot figure this out, you have to help me, and he's like, you have to think about it this way, remember this, these are the lessons.
Right. That's true.
So in that way, I do think that Hannibal is sort of that kind of culinary mentor.
Yeah.
Gusteau is always the voice from within. So I guess in both cases, if you're right, where it's more intuitive, both of them sort of have these intuitive knowledge of how to do it that
That's
these
true.
mentors kind of bring out.
And I mean, for all we know, they maybe just didn't portray it, but there's a little floating ghost of Clarice's dad on her shoulder the whole time.
Yeah.
With doing a French accent.
Yeah, in a big chef's hat.
Yeah. Or no, it's probably the sheep, actually. It's probably the little sheep that's telling her.
Actually, Clarice does wear that hat the entire movie. Maybe the little lamb is underneath pulling the hair. We thought that Ratatouille was a remake of Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs was the prequel to Ratatouille. Oh my God!
Wait, who
wrote these movies?
Silence of the Lambs was written by Remy the Rat?
What? That's incredible. He's in the Union? So what do you think? Which movie do you like more? We'll kind of talk about it on the theme, but also just in general. Which one's the... You said you had a fun little way to grade
similar question to what I just asked, but in a little bit different framing. And I have an answer in mind. The question is, could Clarice Starling make sweetbread au gusteau, and could Remy the Rat catch Buffalo Bill? I think the answer to one is yes and one is no. And that's also God. The question is, in this scenario, it could go either way. Is it just Remy catching it, or is it Remy piloting Linguini trying to catch Buffalo Bill?
Okay. Does Remy have to then kill Buffalo Bill? I think that if that's the case. I think
just getting to the house, maybe. Just figuring out who Buffalo Bill is.
I mean, Remy has a really good sense of smell.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
what I'm thinking.
But also Clarice she might not be able to make the sweetbread a la Gusteau good, but she could probably follow the recipe.
I think I give Remy the upper hand here.
You think that Remy's more capable than Clarice
in this scenario?
Okay, so you think Ratatouille wins out?
I think Ratatouille wins. I think in terms of films too, I would both are great films.
Yeah. They're both wonderful films.
Yeah.
Very different, I think. I think that one is a really interesting like psychology study, and the other one, like in Ratatouille, I never once felt like hurt or scared or anything. I just felt like driving towards like achieve your dreams.
Yes, yeah, very opposite emotions. I thought you were gonna do a bit where you said one's this very fascinating psychology story, and the other one's about a guy who kills and eats people.
One thing I will say though is that because I'm a psychopath.
Oh no!
Is that after the Ratatouille movie?
Why are all the doors, Nick? Why are all the
yes,
doors
I
locked
finally got
in the
you here,
windows? Why do you have a bottle of Chianti?
Yes, it's nothing. It's fine. But the thing after I saw Ratatouille, I was sort of like, man, Remy achieved his dreams. What about mine?
Yeah, what am I doing?
Yeah, what am I doing here? I'm like, I gotta quit my corporate job, move to Paris. So I did have a moment of existential crisis over Remy the Rat, but which I did not have when it came to Hannibal Lecter. But at the same time, I do think that they serve such different parts of our psychologies that both are very interesting. I think that probably Silence of the Lambs is the deeper film, but I think that that Ratatouille has probably had the more positive impact on our culture, which I think probably means that it was the better culinary mentor to us.
It was, yes. We learned so much. And now we're gonna go make Ratatouille. I think we know how to make Ratatouille now.
Okay, how do you make Ratatouille? Just walk us through it. What are the ingredients?
Take some green. There was a green slice in there. I would say zucchini.
Okay.
I saw some yellow. I would
probably
say
also a zucchini.
Squash, yeah, and some red.
What is that though? Tomato?
I don't know.
I mean, it is a stew.
And I think you could do like I feel like eggplant fits into Ratatouille also.
Yeah, there was a purple.
Kind of like gourds and those types.
Gourds,
I mean, I don't
squashes.
know.
Is a squash a gourd?
Yes.
Man, we're doing a hard pivot into our cooking show.
Is the squash a gourd? That's what our show's called.
Yeah. Welcome back to Is This Squash a Gourd? Well, there you have it. We have elevated Ratatouille.
Ratatouille wins.
Yeah, Ratatouille wins. It enters. It entered the cage match with Hannibal Lecter. And Remy he jumped on Hannibal's head, and even though he doesn't have a lot of hairs to pull, he still got the upper hand.
Well, they're there. They're just slicked back so tight. He's really got to get down there.
Yeah, and Hannibal didn't really have a chance. He was in that straitjacket. He had that mask on.
Yeah.
He was making the Bane voice. It didn't really have a chance. He was too obsessed with our modern day Tom Hardy sensibilities. But yeah, I think Ratatouille wins this one. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to Movie versus Movie. Is our grand return. We're going to do some episodes here and there. It's going to be great. I know that we always promise this, but I promise this time we'll make them every once in a while, and you'll hear Patrick again. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This was a delight.
Is there anything you want to plug? Any socials? Any projects?
Not really.
You're like, nah.
I don't really.
You know what? I have one we can plug.
Yeah.
If you're in the Boston area, look up Please and Spank You.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think if you also look up at Please and Spank You Improv. On Instagram, you can find our improv team and come see some comedy.
Yeah, we're on YouTube also. You can watch some recordings of us.
Yeah, we're going to do a show in May in Rhode Island, and we have some charity shows coming up at Remnant Brewing on Sundays at 7 p.m. If you know where that is, good for you. All right, everyone, enjoy your time, and if you want to hear more podcasts like this, you can check out my other podcast, Tabletopped. It's all about D&D and TTRPGs and storytelling. It's a fun time.
It's great.
And until next time, have a movie day!